Have you ever imagined a monster chasing you in the dark? Maybe it crawled out from under your bed when you were a child. Maybe it stood in the corner of your room while you tried to fall asleep. Maybe, even now, the idea of zombies, killers, or faceless creatures still makes your body tighten for a second. We grew up thinking monsters are easy to recognize. They are ugly. They are violent. They come from outside us. They chase, bite, drag, and destroy. But psychology suggests something far more disturbing. Sometimes the monster does not chase us. Sometimes it stands beside us, speaks calmly, wears a lab coat, and tells us to continue. In the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most famous and unsettling experiments in the history of psychology. On the surface, the study looked like a simple experiment about memory and learning. Participants were told they would help test whether punishment could improve a learner's memory. One person would be the teacher and another person would be the learner. The learner would answer questions, and whenever he made a mistake, the teacher would administer an electric shock. The shocks would begin at a low level, then gradually increase with every wrong answer. But the experiment was not really about memory. The learner was an actor. The electric shocks were fake. The screams, protests, and distorted cries of pain were pre-recorded. No one was actually being shocked. But the real participant, the teacher, did not know that. To them, the situation felt real. They sat in front of a shock generator with switches labeled from mild shock all the way up to dangerous levels. They believed that each switch was sending more pain into the body of another human being. At first, the task seemed uncomfortable but manageable. The teacher would read a question, wait for the learner's answer, and press a switch when the learner made a mistake. But as the voltage increased, the learner began to protest. He complained about pain. He demanded to be released. He shouted that he could not continue. Eventually, at the highest levels, he became silent. And when the teacher hesitated, when they turned toward the experimenter and asked whether they should stop, the experimenter did not scream or threaten them. He simply gave calm instructions. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. Before the experiment, many people assumed that almost no ordinary person would go all the way. Surely, most people would stop once another person began screaming. Surely, only a tiny number of disturbed individuals would continue to the maximum voltage. But the results were shocking. In Milgram's original study, about 65% of participants continued to the highest level of 450 volts. They did not do this because they were laughing villains. Many were visibly distressed. They sweated, trembled, argued, hesitated, and showed signs of intense discomfort. But most still obeyed. This is what makes the Milgram experiment so frightening. It does not show that humans are naturally monstrous in a simple way. It shows that ordinary people can become part of destructive systems without feeling hatred toward a victim. They can hurt someone while feeling anxious. They can hear suffering and still continue. They can violate their own moral instincts if an authority figure gives them a structure where responsibility feels like it belongs to someone else. Milgram later described the core of the experiment as a clash between authority and conscience. On one side was the participants' moral discomfort, the sense that harming another person was wrong. On the other side was the authority of science, the lab coat, Yale University, the formal room, the machine, and the command to continue. Again and again, authority won. The participants did not have to become a monster in their own mind. They only had to say, I am following instructions. And that is where the real monster appears. Not as a creature under the bed, but as a system that teaches people to separate their actions from their responsibility. One person gives the order. Another person presses the button. Yet another person decides the rule. And another person says the procedures must be followed. And because the harm is divided into small pieces, each person can feel as if they are only doing their part. Milgram's later variations made the picture even more revealing. When the experiment was moved away from the prestigious setting of Yale to a less official backstreet office, obedience dropped. This suggested that the credibility of the institution mattered. People were more willing to obey when the room itself felt legitimate. In another variation, when the learner was physically closer to the teacher, obedience also dropped. Distance made harm easier. When the victim became more present, more human, and harder to ignore, resistance became more possible. That detail matters because modern life is full of distance. We rarely see the full consequences of the systems we participate in. A policy harms someone we never meet. A comment affects someone far away. A decision becomes a number on a screen. A cruel comment becomes just another post. A rejection becomes an automated email. The farther away the victim feels, the easier it becomes to obey the machine. The Milgram experiment forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. What if monsters are not only the people who enjoy cruelty? What if the more common danger is the ordinary people who feel uneasy, knowing that something is wrong, but continue anyway because someone above them said it was necessary? What if the monster is not hatred, but obedience without responsibility? We like to believe we would be different. We imagine ourselves standing up, refusing, working out, and saying no. Maybe we will do that. But Milgram's experiment asks us not to be too certain. People in that room were not the villains appeared in cartoons. They were ordinary citizens. They had their own consciences. They felt stressed and tired. They even questioned the situation. And still, many of them pressed the switch. So maybe the real question is not, why do monsters hurt people? That question is too easy. The harder question is, why do ordinary people obey monsters? And the answer may be the monsters do not always arrive with claws, teeth, or blood on their hands. Sometimes they arrive as instructions. Sometimes they arrive as procedure. Sometimes it was just the authority. So that the most dangerous monster is the voice that tells you to continue when everything inside you tells you to stop.